So Greg, I want to ask you, work-life balance. We've been hearing a lot about this term. Do you like the term?
No.
Why not?
Well, it kind of insinuates that we need to achieve some kind of optimal balance, and actually that's quite misleading. Even if there was a balance, that assumes it's kind of some static endpoint that we need to get to, whereas life is actually a lot more fluid, and in a way life is work, work is life. It's an arbitrary distinction.
So when people talk about work-life balance, what do you think they're actually getting at?
Well, it could be two things. One is a sense of perhaps at work something is not going quite right. They don't feel engaged, they don't feel challenged enough, they don't have a career trajectory, they don't get on with their people or their boss. And I think all of that can lead to a sense of, well, I'm not getting enough out of work and hence life. Or on the other hand, there's a disconnect outside of work, that there's no sense of meaning in what people do, a sense of connection to family or friends or loved ones, enjoyment of activities, and perhaps a sense of being absent-minded or disconnected even.
So like it's really, instead of work life being polar opposites, you're really looking at connection versus disconnection?
Yeah, it could be connection versus disconnection. It could be sense of doing versus being. It's like constantly, the doing part would be mostly at work, always striving for the next big thing, the to-do list, the next sales target, the next big gig that you're striving for. It's like never ending. And there's a sense of perhaps never being good enough, or only if I reach the next point, then I'm good enough.
Yeah, it's like the magical thinking. It's like, if only I hit that target, then my life would be okay, and then I would feel good about myself. But instead, what happens is that you hit the target, then you just move the target.
Absolutely.
And you don't even like rest and sort of luxuriate in that small victory of experiencing. I think that's the being part of what you're talking about, right? Just like sitting in that feeling of being enough.
Yeah, being enough, not needing anything else. Also unplugging from all the stimulation, just being curious about, what's the weather like outside, the sound of the birds, noticing people's facial expression that we often miss if we're just staring on our phones. And also being comfortable with perhaps boredom, comfortable with not knowing what's going to happen next, because actually all of that is regenerative. It nourishes us, it calms down the nervous system, and also it might lead to making new connections. If you're in line waiting for your coffee, the conversation with the person next to you could be your next business partner, could be your next client, could be your next best friend forever.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a cycle where the doing part is balanced by the being and the non-doing part, because like you said, some of my best ideas have come about through just being bored or having space to think, or being in a bath and not having any sort of deadlines, and then suddenly you get the opportunity to zoom out, because I think a lot of us spend our days too zoomed in and like focus on micro things like the next fire to put out, the next email deadline, and we don't actually get that space to zoom out and see our lives from a bird's eye view.
Yeah, absolutely. And research has actually shown that sometimes stopping whatever you're doing, the problem solving, the researching, just going for a walk or having a hot bath, that's when creative moments arise. That's when you have moments of insight, and that's where exciting innovations are made.
Yeah, it's also about being able to get into that space of deep work, because I find that what happens these days with all these multiple distractions is that our attention gets divided up into these tiny little slivers.
Yes.
So it's like 3 seconds, and then like we go to our email, then another 5 seconds, and then some notification goes off. But when your attention's divided into so many slivers, each tiny sliver is actually too insignificant to do anything really important with. So if we're actually, wanting to get any deep work done, like writing or planning a strategy, or, coming up with some kind of reflection about an important decision to make, it actually involves setting aside, for me, at least like a good 2 to 3 hours to go into that space of deep reflection.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, the 2 or 3 hours of deep work may sound quite ambitious for most of us. It's really also training the mind to be able to do that. So, for example, mindfulness and attention training is really important to allow you to be still and focused and notice when your mindset wander off and then bringing it back. And if you're setting that up and using your intentions to focus on work, then you can go deeper into whatever you set out to do.
You know, the other thing I don't really like about that term work-life balance is that it implies that work's the opposite of life and like the enemy of life. And actually, how I think about it is nourishing activities, what brings me energy versus depleting activities and what sucks the energy out of me. But like work comprises of both nourishing and depleting. Like I think for each of us, there's parts of work that we find really nourishing, and then there's other parts like invoicing and like doing taxes that is just really depleting. But it's not as simple as everything about work is depleting.
No, and same about life. Commuting and doing a grocery shopping for many people can be very depleting, or waiting in line can be boring and frustrating. So life is also those moments that can be perceived as nourishing and depleting. It's about having a sense of, hey, am I being too much depleted, and then finding nourishment.
Absolutely. And I think like even for me, when I was a mother of 2 young children, it was a very energetically draining thing for me on many occasions. Like I just did not enjoy the play element of being around 2 small kids and getting on my hands and knees and playing with them. That part I didn't find nourishing. So I actually, even though that was inverted commas life and family time, that actually sucked me dry, and I found myself like hiding out in work, which was really juicy and nourishing and creative for me. So
well, I think a challenge a lot of people are facing is they actually have maybe not an accurate awareness of how depleted they actually are, and they maybe have been running on the reserve battery for a long time, or they've been running on total depletion and then are exhausted, disengaged, tired, and wondering why that is. And that may actually have nothing to do with your boss or your role. It might be because you're not sleeping or you're worrying about something entirely different. But it then impacts, of course, your mind and your levels of anxiety or your levels of well-being. So it's really important to have a kind of check-in every day or every week of, hey, how are my energy levels? How nourished or depleted am I? And what do I need to do to raise that into the healthy functioning level?
So any last words about pieces of advice? Because actually you're much better at this than me. How do you regularly stay connected and present?
Well, I think it's also really important to be connected to meaning, whether that's in work or your personal life. If there's an absence of meaning, then it's like, oh, this is exhausting. What am I doing this for? I'm just doing this for other people's priorities. And that can be exhausting, and then there's a sense of something is amiss. Same in your personal life. If you feel like there is no meaning, can lead to depression, can lead to helplessness, can lead to even suicidal ideation, because it's so hopeless, nothing seems to be giving me any meaning. So it is important to connect with meaning. Why are you doing the job that you do? And sometimes it's about zooming out. If you don't see it in your immediate work, what's the impact on the clients that you're serving, or the country, or the world? How does it connect with your inner values, and what's important to you? And the same in your personal life. We know having connection to other people is really nourishing and important, but nowadays a lot of us are disconnected. We may have hundreds of friends online, but we actually spend very little time, quality time, meeting them face to face, speaking on the phone. It's about reconnecting with a community, with a tribe. That can be a huge buffer to feeling disengaged, feeling burned out, or having a sense of there's something out of balance.
Great. So, any favorite quotes about work-life balance? You were just asked this by Channel News Asia.
Enjoy the silence.
I love it. Over and out.
Boom.